Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to share some surprising self-care tips that I feel sure is going to change the way that you self-care. It's especially for us women, and when you hear it, it's going to make complete sense to you. Hi, my name is Deb, and welcome to Women Reinventing Midlife TV, where we aim to inspire women over 50 to thrive in a meaningful life that you deeply desire and deserve. Now, do you find it easier to exercise some days than others? Are there days when you get out of bed, you still feel tired, and you find it challenging to put your runners on or even do the chores, let alone go out for a walk? Well, I used to wonder why I felt the same thing. And I used to put it down to doing too much. And when I reached menopause, I put it down to a natural part of aging. But that's not always the case. And when I read this book written by Lisa Lister called Code Red, then it all started to make complete sense to me, and it changed the way I self-care, and I started to listen to my body more. Now, I believe in this so much that I even design my weekly yoga classes that I hold here live in Cairns around this theory. Now, it's surprising, but it's not really, because it's quite ancient, and it's all designed around the phases of the moon. And in my new chair yoga series, which starts next week, each week I'm going to be delivering a class that is actually aligned with the phase of the moon for that particular period. So make sure that you tune in for that. Now, but first, let me explain a little bit of the reason why the moon phases might affect the way that we feel and the ways in which we need to self-care. Now, the platform Gaia says that in Ayurveda, the feminine energy, which is the Shakti energy, is in the womb. And it believes that we can care most for our energy when we align ourselves with nature's cycles, the moon cycle being one of them. Now, we also know that nature and wildlife is affected by the moon phases. And we also know that bodies of water in nature, like the ocean, are affected by the moon because of the tides as they go in and out. Now, we're made of 55% to 78% water, depending on what stage of life that we're at. So it's natural to say that the moon's going to have some kind of influence over the way our body feels, and sometimes in more than one way than we think of. Now, in Lisa's book, I'm going to hold this up again because it is a brilliant book. In Lisa's book, she explains why we might feel a certain way during each moon phase and why we might have lower energy and higher energy and all of those kind of explanations, which is a really, really brilliant and interesting read. We also know already, so many of us know, that the moon affects the way we feel and the way we even sleep, for instance. So, for instance, say the full moon phase, many of us have difficulty getting to sleep, or we might wake up in the middle of the night during the full moon phase. And we put that down to there being more light because the moon's bigger. And if it's a clear sky, then we can see more, there's more natural light. And that's partially the case, but maybe it's not all. And in this video, I'm going to explain some of the reasons why that might be the case. I'm going to explain how it affects our emotions, how it affects our energy, how it affects our behavior, and how we need to plan our self-care adequately around the moon phases. Okay, so let's look at what I call the first phase. I always look at this as the first phase when I'm designing my yoga classes, for instance. The first phase that I see as the first phase is the new moon, which is the dark moon. And that's when the moon is less visible. So we quite often see it as a thin slither of moon. And this is called the dark moon for a reason, because this is the time when our energy levels might be at their lowest. And this is because it also affects our hormones. This is the time where we might feel the most teary. It is the time where we might be our worst inner critic. It's the time when we might give ourselves a hard time. And it's the time when we might have the lowest amount of energy. So during this phase, it is really, really important that we nurture ourselves well, that we have more self-care if we can. And the types of self-care that we do need to be more nurturing. So if you do yoga, it's a slower, more nurturing flow. Maybe it's time to have a bath by candlelight. A great thing to do during this phase for self-care is to do journaling, because quite often there's a lot of emotion that comes up. So it's time to pull out your journal and write down how you're feeling and work through it in your journal. It's definitely not a time to really pound the streets. Jogging or running is definitely not the time for that. It's the time for more nurturing self-care. Okay, so what I call the second phase is the waxing moon, and this is the period when the moon starts to grow, or what's visible to us starts to grow, and it's the time between the new moon and the full moon. Now, during this time, our energy levels start to increase a little bit. And we start to feel like we can do more. Now, there's a danger during this time that we might do too much. It's important to be aware that our energy levels are increasing, but they're not at their fullest yet. So it's important to be aware of this and still have balance in our life. So it's being aware of not agreeing to do too much during this phase. And also planning out your self-care in a way that's still going to nurture you. So it's important to still allow a space for being where you're doing nothing. Yes, you might want to do more energetic exercise, and that's great, but also allowing space for that more nurturing practice as well, to really care for yourself. Now, before I go into that third phase, I'd love it if you're enjoying this content and you're finding it interesting and helpful. Please subscribe to this channel, because it supports me in continuing to provide information like this to you. Okay, so the third phase, let's look at what I call the third phase. Now, that is the full moon. Now, this is the time when a lot of people find it difficult to sleep. Yes, there's more light, especially if it's a clear sky. We have a lot of light. I know during a full moon, I always make sure that the least amount of light as possible can get into the bedroom, because it can disturb sleep. But what also happens during the full moon is we have a lot more energy. So it is when our energy is at its highest, and it's when we're in the doing mode. So it's actually quite a masculine energy, this phase. So we really move into the doing mode, and we want to get stuff done, and when we want to achieve everything, and we really want to get moving. It is a great time for achieving things and completing projects and that kind of thing. It's a really great time for that. Because our energy is at its highest. And during this time, we might want to do more dynamic yoga flows. We might want to do more dynamic exercise, more energetic exercise. Also important to be aware here that balance is always essential, no matter what phase of moon that we're in. So it's still important to allow that downtime, but maybe you only need a little bit of it, not as much as you do it during the other moon phases. And finally, that fourth phase is the waning moon. It's that period when the moon's visibility starts to reduce, and it's the time between the full moon and the new moon. Now, this is the time when our energy levels start to wind down again. And it's important to be aware of how our energy levels are winding down, because we've just come out of a doing mode where we want to get stuff done. And it's really, really easy to carry that through. One thing I didn't mention in the full moon is if we're not feeling energetic during the full moon, it's generally because we've done too much in the other phases. So it's important to be aware of that in all the other moon phases, to not do too much. And especially this one too, the waning moon, because we've just come out of the full moon, and there's a natural tendency to want to keep going. And the mind will keep saying, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to keep going. But the problem is energy starting to reduce. So it's important to be aware of this and to still allow a much bigger space for self-care. Yes, you might want to keep doing more energetic exercise, but allowing more space to just be and do those nurturing practices like yoga, meditation, journaling, all those beautiful practices, because it's a time that we can also start to feel quite irritated because we're trying to do too much. Now, remember, if you've never practiced self-care around the moon phases before, now this is going to be quite new to you. So it's important to remember that you're not always going to get it right. There's going to be times when you slip up. If you are feeling tired, just reflect on what the moon is doing at that time, because it's going to give you some indication of what you need to bring into your daily practices and rituals to actually get the most out of your energy, to actually nurture your energy and really, really care for yourself adequately during each moon phase. Thank you for joining me. If you found this video helpful, please remember to subscribe to this channel, like the video, share the video, and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on that 4-week chair yoga series starting next week, where we can actually put this into practice. Lots of love to you, and I'll look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.